Hello and welcome, I'm Habibi and today I will be giving you a crash course on societal values in this two-part video series where we will cover every single societal value in EU5, from values important in every game such as communalism, humanist, and centralization, to region and religious unique values such as Sinization and jurisprudence. We will go over buffs and malices, the use cases for each societal value, notable unique events associated with having that value, and how to push that societal value in your campaign. That way, you have the tools and understanding to build your society. In this first part, we'll cover individualism versus communalism, capital economy versus traditional economy, land versus naval, serfdom versus free subjects, aristocracy versus plutocracy, spiritualist versus humanist, centralization versus decentralization, and traditionalist versus innovative. All other societal values will be covered in our second part coming out soon. So let's begin. Is the heart of your nation in the individual or in communal families? We'll answer this question in our first societal values, individualism versus communalism. Individualism increases the morale of your armies and navies and increases migration attraction within markets at the cost of estate satisfaction. This makes it a powerful societal value for getting pops where you need them to fill up job positions in valuable RGOs or locations that you want to upgrade to towns and cities, tying well with the encourage migration cabinet action. Being over 50 individualism enables the chance to get the individual land ownership event. This event helps push free subjects, capital economy, as well as individualism, making them a good triple pairing. Additionally, being over 75 individualism gives the chance to get the shrinking the family event, which increases migration to towns and cities substantially. This makes individualism a great choice for a nation trying to increase their army strength while looking to urbanize quickly and turn their towns into cities. You can also increase a location's migration attraction by having available job positions, making you care less whether you have the appropriate amount of pops in a location when building new buildings, as they will migrate quickly with this societal value. But keep in mind, the pop migration speed bonus only applies to locations that you own, and devastated, starving, or dissatisfied pops can migrate outside of your nation to locations owned by a nation who has the dissatisfied pops culture as their primary or accepted culture, as long as it's within the same market, of course. So make sure your pops are satisfied and locations are not starving if you choose this societal value. Make sure to always give out free mobility for the common people if you want peasants and laborers to migrate, as without it, only burghers, nobility, and clergy will migrate throughout your country. And just to be clear, individualism does not impact colonial migration. You can push individualism by granting privileges such as burgher land rights and nobility elaborate court life, using of noble bearing and formalized weights and scales government reforms, and enacting these policies in your laws. Communalism, on the other hand, gives revoked privilege cost, estate satisfaction, and reduces the chance of pops joining rebellions at the cost of slower migration. This makes it a great societal value to remove estate privileges that would normally be almost impossible to remove, such as Serbia's Vlastil Korišnik privilege, Muscovy's Bano lordship privilege, and really any privilege belonging to a powerful estate. Also, by making estate privileges cheaper to revoke, you can gain more crown power by revoking privileges and having your estates have less power. The state equilibrium and joining rebel threshold also means you can tax your estates more and you'll experience weaker rebellions. Being over 50 communalism can proc the community schools event, which gives the option to gain stability or increase monthly literacy. And being over 75% communalism can proc my favorite societal value related event, redefining the family structure, that gives 0.1% yearly pop growth nationwide for 10 years. And just like all societal value events, this event can proc multiple times throughout a campaign, and is not a one-time event. This makes communalism the perfect choice for gaining more crown power, taxing your estates, and pop growth. All things very valuable, especially early on in a campaign. It should be mentioned that the pop migration debuff will make urbanizing and getting your pops where you need them harder, so keep that in mind as you build up your nation with this societal value. You can push communalism by granting the strengthened faith and enforced religious unity privileges to your clergy, granting access to royal and ecclesiastical courts to your commoners, and if you have tribesmen, you can allow gatherings to them. You can also use the public welfare and counter-espionage office government reforms to increase it further. You can also enact the social contract policy under legitimization of power law and 2 different employment systems of equality for 0.1 communalism monthly, and infrastructure then most profitable for 0.5 communalism push. Also worth mentioning that you can push communalism during the Black Death by doing the segregate the infected or expelling the sick actions during that situation. And to just get out of the way, most societal values are not possible to push to 100 naturally. Once you reach your natural limit, you can use a cabinet action to push further and use events, parliamentary debates, and agendas to go all the way to 100. Next on the societal values list is capital economy versus traditional economy. Are you a heavily urbanized society, want to make so much money you have no idea what to do with it? Then capital economy is the choice for you, giving reduced buildings costs, less interest on loans, and massive production efficiency at the cost of food production. This makes it a great societal value to make your buildings massively profitable with a huge 20% production efficiency. This societal value will make the money flow, and in times you need it, make taking loans not terrible. With increased production efficiency, you can also tank prices of goods to increase trade profit by selling your cheaper goods in markets where they are much more expensive, making export trades more profitable, making it a perfect value for nations with not so many pops, nations with many trade buffs and trade efficiency and trade maintenance, or nations with low value RGOs. But keep in mind the most powerful production buildings are not unlocked until later in the game through advances, making the capital economy societal value more powerful the later the game gets. It's worth mentioning that if you play with dynamic institution spawns in your game settings, 50 capital economy is necessary to be a possible spawn location for banking, 30 capital economy is necessary for manufactories, and industrialization. As for all institutions, you can see the spawn requisites by hovering over the institution, then hovering over the percentage as shown on screen. And even if you don't spawn the institution, being a potential spawn location will provide a massive natural institution growth, meaning you'll still be one of the first nations to embrace that institution. For notable societal value events, at 25% capital economy, you can fire the accelerated urbanization event, increasing pop migration to towns and cities, boosting RGO output of a town or city, while also increasing the trade advantage in the associated market for that town or city. At 75% capital economy, you can fire culture of consumption, giving the option to increase trade advantage, increase production efficiency, or push back to traditional economy. But keep in mind, pushing heavily in capital economy will reduce your food production, and with expensive food, you might see yourself spending more on food than you can manage. I recommend that if you choose to push capital economy, you should focus on having locations that act as centers of agriculture. Rural locations with a powerful RGO such as livestock or rice that aren't farmlands and a river, as it's important if you don't want your pops to starve. You can also mitigate the food production malice of this societal value by pairing it with the free subject societal value, which we'll talk about later. You can push capital economy by giving Commercial Advisory Board, Land of Commerce, and Guild Investments privileges to your burghers. You can also enact burghers-controlled mining operations in your mining law, shipwright standard regulation under your maritime law, and tax farming under your Iqta law if you are a Muslim nation. There are 2 employment systems that push capital economy, with profitable first and infrastructure then profitable. Also, having more burghers and less peasants and more trade income will increase capital economy further. This makes capital economy naturally push for many nations as you enter the mid-game with more urbanization, burghers, and higher trade income. Also worth mentioning, starting in age 3, if you have over 50 capital economy, you can take the bank's ledger system reform, giving a massive minus 20% trade maintenance cost. On the other hand, traditional economy is a societal value that will increase pop growth. How so? Well, it's due to its population capacity buff given, as more population capacity in a location will increase the available free land pop growth modifier on that location. And if a certain pop capacity threshold is reached, you can also trigger the abundant free land modifier, increasing pop growth by over 1% yearly in that location, making it a great pairing with communalism, which we talked about earlier, and free subjects, which we will talk about later. Additionally, traditional economy increases RGO output and food production at the cost of more expensive buildings. These buffs make it great for early game economies where RGOs dominate your tax-based contribution, or really any nation that has an abundance of insanely valuable RGOs such as silk, gold, silver, and gems. Being over 50 traditional economy gives the increase in commons event, either giving the bountiful harvest location modifier to certain farm RGO locations, or giving the agriculture boom global modifier, increasing food, wheat, maize, and rice production. Being over 75 traditional economy can trigger renewed focus on traditional practices event, giving a bigger push to traditional economy and giving certain rural locations the bountiful harvest modifier, or you can choose to push for economic modernization, giving a nice 2.5 research progress, as well as push you towards capital economy. Should be mentioned that for many starting setups in EU5, RGOs are more profitable per ducat investment than buildings, and most nations start towards traditional economy. Also, without high traditional economy, locations can get pop capped, stalling their pop growth entirely. You can see pop cap locations with the population map mode highlighted with red bars in the game. You can push traditional economy by having more peasants and less burghers, having nobility control mining, giving means of production privilege to commoners, having the first come first serve employment system, having the feudal nobility and production quotas boroughs reforms, or being bankrupt. Yes, bankruptcy pushes traditional economy, although I would not recommend bankrupting just to push traditional economy. Also worth mentioning, starting in age 3, you can take mining communities if you're over 50% traditional economy, giving iron, copper, and stone output. Next on the list is land versus naval, a societal value that you should choose by the geography of your nation, especially the position of your capital and whether it's on the coast or not. Essentially, if a majority of your trade and proximity goes through land access, then land is probably better for you. If a majority of your trade and proximity goes through sea access, then naval is probably better for you. There's one caveat to this, and that is if your nation can get proximity to land or sea, such as a nation like Portugal, Byzantium, Ottomans, Naples, or Aragon, you'll most likely benefit from naval more, as with the right setup, you can project control through sea much easier than through land. This is mainly because with 100% maritime presence in a sea tile, the naval buff of -1 flat proximity cost actually equates to roughly 20% reduction in proximity cost through maritime versus the 10% through land from having the max land value. This is further increased by advances such as the coastal expansion advance in the Age of Discovery and any other proximity buffs you may have. Combine that with natural harbors and harbor capacity buildings such as docks, protected harbors, and wharfs, and you can then project control very far via the sea, such as this mid-1600s example on Byzantium, where I'm easily able to project proximity in Sicily, North Egypt, the Levant, and the Black Sea, while struggling to get good proximity in Bulgaria. The most important thing to remember here that this is only possible with 100% maritime presence and the appropriate sea tiles you wish to project proximity through, as without it, the flat -1 through maritime turns into a less than 5% proximity reduction through maritime at maxed out naval societal value. You can gain maritime presence with navies on patrol missions. The land societal value gives maximum RGO size, proximity cost through land, trade range used over land at the cost of trade range used over sea. There are actually not many events associated with land societal value. However, the most notable one is when you're above 25% land and 25 offensive societal value, which can fire Admiral's Concerned event, giving a 5% push towards land. In my eyes, this is good since land is one of the hardest societal values to reach 100% with. Best way to get land societal value is by having a big army, having army maintenance turned on, having high army tradition, making your ruler a general, making your heir a general, and your ruler and heir having a general trait, which you can get by having them partake in a battle. You can also push land by parliament agendas and by succeeding to develop the interior and failing the develop coast parliament debates. It's also worth mentioning that if you play with dynamic institution spawns, being at 20 land is necessary to have a location as a potential spawn for the pike and shot institution. Naval, on the other hand, gives maritime presence a flat proximity cost over maritime, trade range over sea at the cost of trade range over land. Unlike land value, there are some events that give naval units buffs, and an event catching smugglers, which can give a huge amount of money depending on your economic base. You can push naval by having a large navy, keeping naval maintenance up, giving nobility the noble navy estate privilege, giving one of these many government reforms, specifically harbor administration, which you can give at any age as soon as you hit 50 naval value. You can also give the amphibious specialization army doctrine, naval audits in your maritime policy, having your ruler and heir be an admiral, and your ruler and heir having an admiral trait. One thing to mention with this societal value specifically is that trade range over sea or land can be very detrimental depending on your nation. For example, if you are France and go full land but want to colonize, you may not be able to trade with your colonies until you get more trade range advances in the age 4 and 5. Due to this debuff, you may limit your trade partners and might consider not pushing towards either naval or land too hard, or even stay right in the middle. Tax your commoners or let them be free, or in the case of EU5, to make more money or to get pop growth and development growth. Essentially, that's the breakdown of serfdom versus free subject societal values. Serfdom can yield a substantially high amount of ducats due to the increase of taxes on the commoners and the raw material output. Since most commoners' taxes come from laborers in your RGOs, more RGO output means more profits, and that means more taxes. This will come at the cost of more peasant and labor food consumption. Here are two examples of real games. One as Poland and another as Serbia, both in the early 1400s, and both with serfdom societal value pushed substantially. Both are making high income from the commoners, which we are taxing heavily. Due to serfdom's buffs, it means it combines greatly with traditional economy. Having both serfdom and traditional economy maxed out will yield an RGO output of 30%. The one major challenge with serfdom is taxing them without severely upsetting your commoners, and most privileges for the commoners push free subjects. Well, I say just tax them anyways. Commoners will tend to have the weakest power share in most nation setups, and if you're taxing them heavily, they won't have the money to invest in rebellions. This means that even with their high taxation, you won't have to worry about any uprisings. But keep in mind, since most locations will have a majority of commoners, this will negatively impact your location satisfaction, decreasing your control and prosperity. But maybe those pesky commoners deserve to be taxed to high heaven. It's your land that they're working on anyways. Notable events associated with serfdom range from negative to positive. If you're above 20 serfdom and you do not have free mobility of the common people privilege, you can fire the major revolt event, reducing commoner satisfaction by 50% in multiple locations. On a positive note, having over 40% serfdom can fire the serfs properly exploited event, giving 10% raw materials output for 10 years. You can push serfdom by granting nobility-controlled serfdom and banal lordship to your nobility estate, but keep in mind, banal lordship also gives a global minus 5% control in all locations, so probably not worth. There are multiple policies that push serfdom, such as court language and language of pleading, uneducated masses in the education of masses law, mandatory impressment under maritime law, and these other policies. For government reforms, you can give out restricted worker unions, agriculture cultivation, and starting in the age of discovery, you can give universal serfdom if you have over 50% serfdom, which also notably gives plus 33% crown power. Free subjects, on the other hand, reduces peasant and labor's food consumption, increases prosperity growth, and pop promotion speed at the cost of maximum tax for commoners. Ever since the change to prosperity decay, gaining prosperity is a bigger challenge, making free subjects a good choice for the benefits of prosperity. If you're unaware, 100% prosperity gives 0.1 migration attraction, plus 0.04 monthly development, plus 10 character life expectancy, and most importantly, plus 0.2% yearly pop growth. 0.2 is absolutely massive. As mentioned before, combining free subjects, traditional economy, and over 75% communalism is the best societal value combination for pop growth. Added with the development buffs over time, this makes free subjects a great societal value for long-term benefit. But even in the short term, the pop promotion speed buff helps turning peasants into burghers and laborers when constructing new buildings or expanding RGOs. This can make urbanizing in your campaign a swift process with less repercussions due to the reduced food cost of your commoners. For notable events, there are 3 worth mentioning. By having 25 free subjects, you can fire the Free Thinkers Not Prosecuted, which gives a massive 15% research progress for 10 years. And also fire Fair Laws Embraced by All, which gives plus 1 estate satisfaction and plus 2.5 tax efficiency for 10 years. There's also the A Soft Answer Turneth Away Wrath event, which converts 5% of multiple locations to your primary religion. As for pushing free subjects, many of the estate privileges for commoners push it, such as free mobility for the common people, fewer levies, and represented in the parliament. Multiple government reforms that push free subjects such as national assemblies and peasant land inheritance, and multiple policies in your laws such as expanded levies, free oarsmen, and favoring the common people. And as mentioned earlier in this video, you can make the final push to 100% free subjects by being at least 25% in individualism through the associated individual land ownership event. Nobles or burghers? Or maybe neither? Which will you choose in the next societal values, aristocracy versus plutocracy? Starting with aristocracy, which gives possible nobles in towns and cities, and discipline at the cost of noble powers and higher expected cost of court. In my opinion, believe it or not, the best part of aristocracy is not the discipline, but instead the possible number of nobles. And why would you ever want more nobles? Well, that's because they consume more goods per pop, stimulating your economy. Specifically, nobles in 20 or higher development will consume even more valuable goods like fine cloth. On a per pop level, each noble's pop consumes as much as 10 to 20 burghers, depending on literacy and development of the location they inhabit. That's a lot of profit. Those extra nobles can stimulate early economies when goods demands are not as high. Add that on top of more nobles' power, which means less burghers' power, means more taxing on those burgher buildings due to many nobles' consumption. Additionally, burghers can be simply generated by making buildings that employ burghers, like most production buildings for a majority of the game, while nobles can only be generated by the player through castles and government buildings such as the Royal Garden or the Royal Court. To add to this, having more nobles of primary and accepted pops throughout your nation will boost legitimacy up to 0.5 a month when you have 1% or more of your total pops being nobles. That being said, the 5% discipline is still a nice military buff at the end of the day. This makes aristocracy a strong choice in the early game when you have low demands of goods, want more nobility for nobles' levies, and more quality from extra discipline. It should be noted that if you want to turn into a monarchy from a republic or a theocracy, you will need 95 aristocracy. For notable events associated with aristocracy, between 10 and 80 aristocracy fire the more nobility in the army event that can help push quantity or quality societal values, two values notoriously hard to push and that we will cover in the next video. Having over 30 aristocracy can fire the nobility grateful for our favor, giving you a gift from the nobility as well as some satisfaction. And you have over 25 aristocracy and more than 5 war exhaustion while fighting a war, you can fire the nobility support the state event, reducing war exhaustion by 2. You can push aristocracy by having more nobles of primary or accepted culture, granting auxilium et concilium, elite council, and land rights for the nobility. Granting government reforms like autocracy of noble bearing and noble elite, passing policies for laws like aristocratic court and royal court customs, central council and administrative system laws, and a noble army and recruitment law. Plutocracy, on the other hand, gives possible burghers in towns and cities, trade efficiency, and reduced cost of court at the cost of burgher power. Having the possible burghers in towns and cities is a nice buff, so you don't have to concern yourself too much with promotion, as you will always have burghers ready to get employed before your building even finishes constructing. Trade efficiency and cost of court means more money from trade and less expenses on your monthly balance, but the stronger burghers mean that you may be less able to tax them if they're over 25% power. As an entire package, this makes plutocracy also a strong choice in the early game when you want to weaken your nobility to tax them further and you want to revoke any of their privileges. Or in the mid and late game when trade picks off greatly and you want to increase trade efficiency. Just like aristocracy, in order to turn into a republic from a monarchy or theocracy, you will need to have 95 plutocracy. For notable events, being over 25 plutocracy can proc a lot of positive events, such as the merchant benefit event spawning a burgher character with between 60 to 90 in each stat, or the better administration event, which gives 5 research progress. You can get Burgers Pleased event, giving money from the burgers. The Tolerance for All event, which gives +2 tolerance of heathens and heretics for 10 years. If you're at war, you can fire For Freedom event, which gives 10 morale of armies for 10 years. You can push plutocracy by having more burghers' total estate power, giving burghers building rights and formal guilds, giving the plutocratic ethos or sortition government reforms, giving policies such as burghers controlled mining policy, favor the wealthy, or strong guild. Next societal values put 2 important aspects of any nation in EU5 at odds. Unify your religion or your culture in spiritualist versus humanist societal values. Out of all the values, in my opinion, this one is one of the more straightforward ones. You want to convert your people faster to your primary religion? Go spiritualist. If you want to culture convert pops to your primary culture, go humanist. If you want to do both at the same time, stay in the middle. This will change from campaign to campaign. Important details to know before you make this decision is the impact of the wrong religion will reduce pop satisfaction, reduce religious unity, which will reduce clergy satisfaction, which will probably reduce your research speed, while the impacts of having unaccepted culture is that you cannot turn an integrated location of the wrong culture, aka not accepted or primary, to a core location, as well as reducing pop satisfaction, depending on that pop's opinion of your primary culture. It's also important to note that for every level of tolerance, be it true faith, heretics, or heathen, it will translate into 5% satisfaction gain of pops of that religion. On one hand, Spiritualist gives possible clerics in towns and cities, tolerance of true faith, and pop conversion speed at the cost of pop assimilation speed. Not bad for converting religions and getting more satisfaction from it. You'll find Spiritualists especially useful in situations where you can accept all pops in your lands easily and want to convert them, such as playing as Norse Sweden expanding in Scandinavia, or a nation in Germany who just embraced the Reformation. You will also need 95 Spiritualists if you want to turn into a theocracy from a republic or monarchy. It's also worth mentioning that if you're a Catholic nation, having at least 25 Spiritualists is necessary to have a location as a potential spawn point for the Confessionalism institution, of course if you're playing with dynamic institution spawns. Notable events associated with Spiritualists are the Monastic Intellectual event if you are above 25 Spiritualists, which gives the choice of 5 research progress, or the Research Considered Unholy modifier for 5 years, which gives monthly prosperity, monthly control, and proximity cost at the cost of 5% research speed. If you are above 50 Spiritualists, you can fire Holy Relic Discovered event, which gives the option to gain a masterpiece work of art or religious influence and clergy satisfaction. You can push Spiritualists by having most of your clergy being your primary faith, having low tolerance of heathens and heretics, granting to your clergy religious advisory council, clergy tax exemption, and clergy and administration. You can also give the religious law government reform, and also have law policies such as religious teachings, same religion heir law, and strict censorship. On the other hand, Humanist gives tolerance to heretics and heathens and increases pop assimilation speed at the cost of pop conversion speed, especially useful in situations where accepting pops is too expensive or you cannot compete with a nation's cultural tradition, such as expanding in the mid-game in Persia and suddenly all the pops are Mongolian. Or in more common occurrence when playing as Ottomans, a nation that can stack a lot of tolerance of heathens and heretics and has access to the invite Turkic migration action from their situation, this societal value becomes incredibly powerful. It's also worth noting that culture conversion can even be useful when you have a culture accepted, as having fewer pops of that culture in your nation and in the world reduce the cost of accepting that culture. Added with the fact that accepted or primary culture are necessary for coring locations outside of vassal integration, Humanist becomes a strong choice for a wide nation conquering the world. For notable events, having over 50 humanism can trigger the religious tolerance event, giving the choice for getting the tolerance for all modifier for 5 years, giving tolerance of heathens and heretics +2, or the secular education event, giving monthly literacy 0.1 for 10 years. You can push Humanists by having high tolerance of heathens and heretics, having the cultural recognition and enlightened aristocracy government reforms, and through many law policies such as allowing slave religion, education of the people, no censorship, any religion heir, and more that unlock as the game progresses into the later ages. If you're playing as a Muslim nation, you can also grant the Pact of Omar and dhimmi bureaucrats estate privileges. Next on the list of societal values is a controversial one, especially after patch 1.08 that introduced negative subject loyalty to centralization and made vassals and fiefdoms push decentralization. Is vassal meta dead? Is centralization bad now? Not necessarily. Just like all the societal values, both centralization and decentralizations have their use cases. Centralization gives crown power, proximity costs, and counter-espionage at the cost of loyalty of subjects. While the crown power and proximity costs will increase your income, if you have subjects, the disloyalty of subjects' malice will force you to pay more in diplomatic spending to keep them loyal. Also, as you increase your tax base from control over your territory, your diplomatic spending base cost will increase due to the economic base increasing. This makes centralization a good value to increase once you have integrated most of your subjects or even all of them, so you no longer have to worry about its debuff or at a later stage in the game when you have more advances that increase subject loyalty and more laws to push centralization. It can still be good to focus on centralization value early if you intend to play tall and not expand through many subjects, but if you do plan to expand fast in the early game, vassals are still the way to go as province integration is slow, and even with max centralization, proximity to your capital can still be a challenge. There are not many notable events related to centralization, with the most prominent positive event being Centralization Yields Benefits event, which gives the centralized state-nation modifier for 10 years. There are 2 estate privileges that increase centralization, building road rights to the burghers, and monetary fiefs to the nobility. There are so many government reforms and law policies that push centralization, most of them unlocked in later ages and advances. You can also increase centralization by increasing your average development and control in your nation. You can also momentarily push centralization by choosing to have a parliament in your capital. A great opportunity to push it further than its natural limit combined with your cabinet action. On the other side of the spectrum, decentralization gives estate satisfaction equilibrium, estate satisfaction recovery, and loyalty of subjects at the cost of reduced counter-espionage. This makes decentralization perfect for early game where you can rely on subjects for expansion and controlling land throughout your nation, where you can benefit from subjects with each of them having their own cabinet actions, their own capitals, and their own control. By releasing subjects, you also do not have to deal with spending your valuable early game cabinet actions on integrating land that will take a long time to complete. Additionally, the estate satisfaction and satisfaction recovery makes max taxing estates possible and removing privileges easier as the recovery from removing their privilege is faster. Just like centralization, there are not many prominent positive events in regards to decentralization, with the most notable event being the Poor Payments event, reducing mercenary maintenance for 10 years. There are many estate privileges, reforms, and laws that increase decentralization, all of which you can see here. Also, each vassal and fiefdom increases decentralization push by 0.025 per subject, so having a lot of subjects will naturally push you further into decentralization. And just to be clear, reliance on subjects for expansion and expansion through subjects in the early game is an intended aspect of Europa Universalis 5 gameplay. Most nations historically in the start date of EU5 relied on feudal government structures to rule over vast lands, and early on, decentralization is supposed to be the stronger value for most nations, as integrating through cabinets is slower due to high cultural tradition, no power projection, and no modifiers for integration, and high proximity costs. But as you progress through the game, your reliance on subjects should diminish, and when you reach the age of absolutism, you gain integration of areas, control actions over areas, and insane culture influence, power projection advances, modern roads, and advances that give subject loyalty to offset the debuff of centralization. By the way, if you did not know, culture influence versus culture tradition and power projection both decrease or increase province integration. For the last societal values we'll venture in this crash course, we will talk about traditionalist versus innovative, aka the least gone for societal value versus the most gone for societal value. Jokes aside, after some deep research, the traditionalist societal value is not as useless as you may think. Traditionalist gives estate satisfaction, culture tradition, and stability investment cost at the price of institution embracement cost. These 3 buffs can actually make traditionalist worth in the early game of campaigns where you still have not united your primary culture and are surrounded by foreign cultures, making integration and assimilation of your lands with your culture harder. And once again, estate satisfaction is useful to fully tax your estates without making them upset. The stability investment also helps in early game situations where you want to remove estate privileges that you don't want and boost up stability at a less expensive cost. One specific nation that comes to mind that fits this criteria perfectly is Byzantium. You have many Greek locations not in your control. The Ottomans who will expand into Greek territory will be integrating provinces and annexing subjects with your primary culture. You also get an early game disaster where you need stability to get out of, and there are many estate privileges that you want to remove early in your run. Another strong case for traditionalists is if you're playing as a subject where your primary culture is different than your overlords, and you want to delay an annexation as long as possible before being able to take on your overlord in an independence war or movement. To offset the institution cost malice of this value, by being a smaller nation such as Byzantium or Brittany, you can simply wait for the institution to spread to more locations and tank the price of paper, making it cheaper to take the institution, though this will not decrease the stability cost, but only the ducat cost. Simply put, traditionalists can be a good societal value to maintain in the early game of some campaigns, but as you get larger and into later stages of the game, it becomes insanely hard to recommend when compared to innovative. When it comes to notable events, being at just 25 traditionalists, you can fire the clergy mobilizes population, the religious devotion, the unity of faith, and the divine guidance events, which all give a nice 12 stability. That's 4 potential plus 12 stability events for just being at 25 traditionalists. Also, with 25 traditionalists and not being at war for 5 years, you can fire the Failed Promises event, giving a free religious war CB on a neighbor of a different religion. At 50 traditionalists, you can fire the Religious Zeal event, giving a pop conversion speed buff of 25% for 10 years, making traditionalists a nice pairing with spiritualists. You can boost traditionalists by giving the religious literacy rights privilege to your clergy, accepting the tenet of person in your patriarchate laws if you're a branch of Christianity that has a patriarchate, such as Orthodox, giving out reforms such as enforced religious adherence if you're above 50 spiritualist, having the licensing of press reform, or if you're feeling wild, you can give up a cabinet seat and reduce all estate powers by 50% by giving out patrimonialism government reform. You can also boost traditionalism by giving out law policies such as uneducated masses and closed borders. Also worth mentioning that many of the actions that you can do during the Black Death push traditionalists very hard. That brings us to innovative, which gives embrace institution cost, cultural influence, and max literacy at the cost of stability investment. At the max level of 100 innovativeness, you gain a global 10% max literacy, equating to 10% more research speed and a wild array of other modifiers on the location level, such as production efficiency and development growth from literacy of burghers, conversion speed from literacy of clergy, fort defense from literacy of soldiers. There is also a hidden cost of high literacy that pops will demand different types of goods in the respective markets, including goods that are very hard to get into your market. Having high literacy and having the Enlightenment institution embraced will also make you a nation a potential target for the revolution disaster in the last age. But besides that and the stability investment, this makes innovative hard to pass in most campaigns. On top of that, if you play with dynamic institution spawns, being over 20 innovativeness societal value is necessary to be a potential spawn location for the printing press, scientific revolution, and the Enlightenment institutions. All notable events for innovative societal value can be fired at just 25 innovative value. This includes the Dangerous Ideas Are Spreading event that at the cost of 12 stability pushes the humanist societal value, the New Thinkers Arise and the Scientific Revolution Continues events that give 5 research progress, the Wave of Innovation event that gives 10% research speed, which I should note can be stacked with Free Thinkers events from free subjects for a whopping 25% research speed if you are lucky, making innovative and free subjects a good pairing. And finally, the Burst of Administrative Thought event that gives 10% cabinet efficiency. You can push innovative societal value by having high average literacy, having more works of art, giving out urban development grants, treasury rights, guild investments, and control over monetary policy privileges to your burghers, by giving the noble patronage of the arts privilege to your nobility, giving out government reforms such as national assemblies, and mandatory bureaucratic education, and law policies such as education of the people, no censorship, and court of culture. And if you have 50 innovative and 50 humanist, you can give the exchange of ideas government reform, giving an additional 5% research speed. I'll finish this video guide by saying that throughout your campaigns, you may feel that a certain societal value is better at one stage, while its opposing value is better later. You may also feel that staying in the center of a societal value may benefit you more than pushing in any direction, like the example given with Plutocracy versus Aristocracy or Spiritualist versus Humanist. There isn't a best societal values to go for in every single game for every single nation. Each societal value has a use case and its benefits and downfalls. Every societal value has positive events from boosting stability, giving research speed, or just giving you a bunch of ducats, while simultaneously giving negative events like negative stability or dissatisfaction of different estate groups. Using the knowledge gained from this video, we hope that you better understand societal values, when it would benefit you to push for one, and how you can push to it in a natural manner as you play your campaigns in Europa Universalis 5. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part of this 2-part series where we'll cover the rest of the societal values from offensive versus defensive to absolutism versus liberalism. Subscribe so you don't miss it.